I never imagined that walking out of my childhood home on that cold November night would be the moment my life truly began. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the family we're born into isn't the one we're meant to keep, and how the greatest act of self-love can be simply walking away. Growing up in a small suburb outside of Denver, Colorado, I learned early that love in our household wasn't distributed equally. My older sister, Rachel, was everything my mother had ever wanted in a daughter: beautiful, charming, and effortlessly confident. She had this way of lighting up a room that made everyone else fade into the background, especially me. I was the quiet one, the bookish one, the one who seemed to exist only to highlight how special Rachel was by comparison. Our mother, Linda, had been a beauty queen in her youth, and she saw herself reflected in Rachel's sparkling green eyes and perfect smile. They shared inside jokes, went on shopping trips together, and had this unspoken language that I could never quite decode. My father, Robert, was more of a shadow in our home, working long hours at his accounting firm and deferring to my mother on all matters related to us girls. He wasn't cruel, just absent, both physically and emotionally. I remember being 7 years old, sitting at the kitchen table doing my homework while Rachel, then 10, practiced her dance routine in the living room. Mom watched her with such adoration, calling out encouragements and suggestions. When I asked if she wanted to see the story I'd written for school, she barely glanced up. "Not now, Emma. Can't you see I'm watching your sister?" That became the soundtrack of my childhood. Not now, not important, not you. The comparisons started early and never stopped. Rachel's B+ was celebrated with ice cream sundaes and proud phone calls to Grandma. My straight A's were met with a distracted, "That's nice, dear," if they were acknowledged at all. When Rachel made the cheerleading squad, we went out for a fancy dinner. When I won the state science fair, my certificate ended up buried under mail on the kitchen counter. By the time I hit middle school, I'd developed a strategy. If I couldn't be loved, I could at least be useful. I became the family problem solver, the one who remembered dentist appointments and permission slips, who helped Dad organize his home office and made sure Rachel's homework was in her backpack. I thought if I made myself indispensable, they'd have to notice me. They'd have to care. But here's the thing about being useful. People get used to it. They start expecting it, and when you're always there, always helping, always fixing, you become invisible. You become furniture. Comfortable, reliable furniture that no one really sees anymore. High school was when things got worse. Rachel discovered boys, and with them came drama. Lots of drama. Suddenly, our house was filled with tears and shouting matches, slammed doors and whispered phone conversations that lasted until 3 in the morning. And somehow, every single crisis became my fault. When Rachel's boyfriend dumped her junior year, Mom found her sobbing in her room and immediately came looking for me. "What did you say to him?" she demanded. I hadn't even spoken to the boy. When Rachel failed her driving test, it was because I'd been distracting her with my studying. When she didn't get invited to Madison's pool party, surely I must have done something to turn people against her. The accusations were absurd, but they stuck. In my mother's mind, Rachel was perfect, so if something went wrong in her life, there had to be an external cause, and that cause was always me. I threw myself into my studies with a desperate kind of determination. If I couldn't earn their love, maybe I could earn my escape. I joined every academic club, took every advanced placement class, tutored other students for extra money that I carefully hid in an old shoebox under my bed. My teachers praised my dedication. My guidance counselor called me one of the most promising students she'd ever worked with. None of it mattered at home. The real breaking point started during my senior year. I'd been accepted early decision to the University of Colorado with a partial scholarship. I was over the moon. It was my dream school, and the scholarship meant I wouldn't be a financial burden. I rushed home with the acceptance letter, my hands shaking with excitement. Rachel was on the couch, painting her nails and watching reality TV. Mom was in the kitchen, starting dinner. "Mom," I said, breathless with excitement, I got in to see you with a scholarship." She glanced at the letter, then at Rachel. "That's nice, honey. Rachel, tell Emma about your callback for the spring musical." That's nice. 2 words that summed up 18 years of being invisible. I stood there, holding my future in my hands, while they chatted about audition songs and costume ideas. I went to my room and cried silent tears, the kind I'd perfected over years of practice. The kind that didn't make noise, didn't draw attention, didn't disturb anyone else's happiness. But something shifted in me that day. A small flame of anger began to burn alongside the hurt. I started to see our family dynamics more clearly. I noticed how Mom rewrite history to make Rachel the victim in every situation. I saw how Dad checked out entirely, escaping into his office the moment voices were raised. I recognized the pattern of blame that always led back to me. Spring semester was a countdown. I worked more tutoring jobs, saved every penny, and made quiet plans. I'd defer enrollment for a year, work full-time, save enough to be truly independent. I didn't tell anyone. I'd learned that my plans, my dreams, my future, none of it mattered to them anyway. The explosion came in May, just 2 weeks before graduation. Rachel had applied to colleges too, but half-heartedly, assuming she'd take a gap year to find herself or maybe pursue acting. She'd been rejected from all but one school, a small state college 2 hours away that she considered beneath her. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, our house was a war zone. "This is your fault," Rachel screamed at me over dinner. "You probably sabotaged my applications. You've always been jealous of me." I set down my fork carefully, a lifetime of swallowed words rising in my throat. "I didn't even know where you applied, Rachel." "Liar!" She turned to Mom, tears already forming. "She's always been like this, always trying to make me look bad. She probably called the schools and told them lies about me." The accusation was so ridiculous I almost laughed. Almost. But Mom's face was already hardening, already choosing sides. "Emma, is this true? Did you interfere with your sister's applications? Are you seriously asking me that?" I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "Do you honestly think I have nothing better to do than sabotage Rachel's future?" "Don't take that tone with me," Mom snapped. "Your sister is upset. The least you could do is show some sympathy instead of being so selfish." "Selfish?" The word came out as a whisper. "I'm selfish?" "You've always been jealous," Rachel continued, warming to her theme. "You can't stand that people like me better, that I have friends, that Mom and Dad actually enjoy spending time with me." Each word was a carefully aimed arrow, finding its mark with years of practice. But this time, something was different. This time, I didn't bow my head and take it. This time, I looked at my father, silent at the head of the table, and asked, "Do you enjoy spending time with Rachel more than me, Dad?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "Emma, don't start." "It's a simple question," I pressed. "When was the last time you asked about my life? My interests? When was the last time any of you even pretended to care about me as more than an inconvenience?" "You're being dramatic," Mom said, but there was something in her voice, a flicker of discomfort. "Am I? Name one thing about me. One dream, one goal, one friend. Tell me my favorite subject or what I want to major in or where I've been working for the past year. Tell me anything about me that isn't related to how I've supposedly wronged Rachel." The silence was deafening. Rachel's face had gone red, anger replacing her tactical tears. "You think you're so special," she spat. "So smart, so perfect. Well, guess what? Nobody cares about your stupid achievements. Nobody wants to hear about your boring life. You're just there, like furniture. Ugly, boring furniture that ruins everything." "Rachel!" Dad finally spoke up, but it was too weak, too late. "No, let her talk," I said, standing up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "Let her say what you're all thinking. What we're all thinking," Mom said, her voice ice cold, "is that this family was happier before you came along. Rachel never had these problems until you started filling her head with doubts. You've done nothing but cause problems since the day you were born." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Even Dad looked shocked. Rachel, emboldened by Mom's support, delivered the final blow. "She's right. You've ruined our lives. Everything bad that happens in this family is because of you. We'd all be better off if you just disappeared." I looked at each of them in turn. My mother, whose love I'd spent 18 years trying to earn. My sister, who'd been taught since birth that I was less than her, my father, who'd never once stood up for me, and I realized with startling clarity that they were right about one thing: someone did need to disappear, but it wasn't going to be in the way they expected. "Okay," I said simply. "You win." I walked to my room with measured steps, pulled out my hidden money, packed a bag with essentials, and left. No dramatic exit, no slamming doors, no final words. I simply walked out of the house and out of their lives. The night was cold for May, but I didn't feel it. I felt nothing but a strange sense of lightness, as if I'd set down a weight I'd been carrying my whole life. I'd like to say I had a plan, but I didn't. I had $1,847 in cash, a high school diploma 2 weeks away, and a desperate need to be anywhere but there. I took a bus to downtown Denver and found a cheap motel that rented by the week. The rooms smelled like stale cigarettes and broken dreams, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I had a space where no one could blame me for existing. The first few weeks were the hardest. I dropped out of school with just days left until graduation. I couldn't risk them finding me there. I got a job at a 24-hour diner, working graveyard shifts that left me exhausted but paid in cash. During the days, I haunted the public library, using their computers to apply for online work. I discovered I could make money tutoring students remotely. My years of academic excellence finally had a practical application. I started small, charging barely anything just to build a client base. I lived on ramen noodles and determination, saving every penny I could. The loneliness was crushing at times. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text someone, anyone, before remembering I had no one to text. My family never tried to find me. No missing person reports, no frantic searches. Their silence told me everything I needed to know. I had been as disposable to them as they'd always made me feel. But slowly, painfully, beautifully, I built a life. My tutoring business grew. I moved from the motel to a tiny studio apartment. I got my GED and enrolled in online college courses. I learned to cook real meals, to budget money, to be alone without being lonely. I discovered parts of myself that had been buried under years of blame and neglect. I found out I was funny. Who knew? Without Rachel there to steal the spotlight, I could actually make people laugh. I was good at explaining complex concepts in simple ways, which made me a sought-after tutor. I had a talent for digital marketing, which I taught myself through YouTube videos and free online courses. I was resilient in ways I'd never imagined. My 20s became a blur of growth and grinding work. I expanded from tutoring to creating online courses. Emma's SAT Prep Masterclass became my first real success. I reinvested every profit, learning video editing, website design, search engine optimization. I worked 18-hour days and loved every minute of it because it was mine. My success, my failure, my choice. By 25, I was making 6 figures. By 28, I had a team of contractors working for me. I moved to a beautiful apartment in downtown Denver with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the mountains. I traveled to conferences, networked with other entrepreneurs, built friendships with people who saw me for who I was, not who I wasn't. The funny thing about success is that it changes you, not in the ways people think. I didn't become arrogant or materialistic, but I did become confident. I learned to take up space, to voice my opinions, to believe that my thoughts and feelings mattered. I went to therapy and unpacked years of trauma. I learned about narcissistic family dynamics, about scapegoating, about golden children. I learned that what happened to me wasn't my fault. I also learned to set boundaries. When distant relatives tried to friend me on social media, I declined. When high school classmates reached out with gossip about my family, I didn't engage. I built walls not out of anger but out of self-preservation. I had worked too hard to let toxicity back into my life. The business continued to grow. Expanded into corporate training, teaching communication skills to executives. I wrote a book about overcoming educational obstacles. I was invited to speak at conferences. My life became everything I'd never dared to dream it could be. But success is a funny thing. It has a way of reaching people you thought you'd left behind. 8 years after I walked out of that house, 8 years of silence, my phone rang on a Tuesday morning. I was in my home office reviewing proposals for a new course launch. The number was local but unfamiliar. I almost didn't answer. "Hello? Emma?" The voice was older, shakier, but unmistakably my mother's. I felt my body go cold, then hot, then numb. 8 years of therapy, of growth, of healing, and her voice still had the power to transport me back to that scared, invisible girl. But only for a moment. I took a breath, centered myself, and responded with a calm I didn't entirely feel. "What do you want, Linda?" Using her first name was deliberate, a boundary drawn in a single word. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Is that any way to talk to your mother?" "I don't know," I replied evenly. "I haven't had a mother in 8 years. "Emma, please, we need to talk." "No, we don't. Whatever you want, the answer is no." "You don't even know what I'm calling about." The familiar indignation was creeping into her voice, but there was something else there too. Desperation. "Let me guess," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You need money." The silence told me everything. I almost laughed. Of course that's why she was calling. Not to apologize, not to reconcile, not because she'd spent 8 years regretting what she'd done, because she needed something. "It's not like that," she finally said, but the protest was weak. Things have been hard. Your father lost his job 2 years ago. The house is in foreclosure, and Rachel—" "I don't care," I interrupted. "I don't care about any of it. She's your sister." "No, she's not. She's someone I used to know. Someone who told me I ruined her life just by existing. Remember? We were all upset that night. Things were said." "Things were said?" I could feel my anger building, clean and sharp. "You told me you wished I'd never been born. You told me the family would be better off without me. So I gave you what you wanted. I disappeared. And now, 8 years later, when you need something, suddenly I exist again?" "Emma, please. We're desperate. Rachel, she's had a hard time. She never finished college and she's been struggling to find work. She has a daughter now, Sophia. She's 3. We've been helping, but with Robert out of work—" I felt a pang of something. Not sympathy exactly, but a recognition of life's irony. The golden child who could do no wrong had faltered without her scapegoat to blame. But that wasn't my problem anymore. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said, and I meant it in an abstract way. "But I can't help you." "Can't or won't." The accusation in her voice was so familiar, it was almost comforting. "Both. I have my own life now, Linda. A life I built without any help from any of you. You made it very clear that I wasn't part of your family. I'm just honoring your wishes." "I'm your mother!" "No, you were my mother. You gave up that right when you chose Rachel over me every single day for 18 years. When you blamed me for everything that went wrong. When you told me you'd be happier if I'd never been born. You don't get to play the mother card now." She started crying then. Ugly sobs that might have moved me once. Now they just made me tired. "Please, Emma, I know we made mistakes, but we're family. Family helps each other." "Family helps each other," I repeated incredulously. Where was that philosophy when I needed help? When I was a child who just wanted to be loved? When I was homeless at 18 because you kicked me out? Where was family then? You left on your own. Because you told me I ruined your lives, what was I supposed to do, stick around for more abuse? "It wasn't abuse," she protested weakly. "We were just— Rachel was special. She needed more attention." "And I needed parents," I shot back. "I needed a mother who saw me as more than an inconvenience. I needed a father who would stand up for me just once. I needed a sister who didn't treat me like competition for affection that was never mine to begin with. But I didn't get any of that, did I?" The crying intensified. "I'm sorry, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I'm sorry." But it wasn't okay. Sorry was just a word, and a cheap one at that. Sorry didn't undo 18 years of neglect. Sorry didn't erase the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what was wrong with me. Sorry didn't pay for the therapy I needed to understand that the problem was never me at all. "I don't want anything from you," I said quietly. "I haven't wanted anything from you in 8 years. Please don't contact me again." "Emma, wait!" I hung up. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down. I stood and walked to my window, looking out at the city I'd made my home. Somewhere out there in a suburb I never visited, my biological family was struggling. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't my problem to solve. But the calls didn't stop. Over the next few days, my phone became a battlefield. Missed calls from my mother, my father, numbers I didn't recognize that were probably Rachel. Text messages ranging from pleading to angry to guilt-tripping. Voicemails I deleted without listening to. They were relentless in their sudden need for me. Then came the email that changed everything. It was from Rachel, sent to my business address. Of course they'd Googled me. Of course they knew about my success. The subject line read, "Please read from your sister." Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Emma, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I know I don't deserve your help or your forgiveness. But I'm not writing for me. I'm writing for my daughter. Sophia, it wasn't her fault any more than my childhood had been my fault. But acknowledging that didn't mean I had to fix it. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. You can't save people who won't save themselves. You can't pour from an empty cup. And my cup had been drained dry by these people long ago. I closed the email without responding. The escalation was predictable. When I didn't respond to calls, texts, or emails, they decided to show up in person. It was a Thursday evening. I was cooking dinner, a simple pasta dish, music playing softly in the background. The knock on my door was sharp, insistent. I knew who it was before I looked through the peephole. Some part of me had been expecting this, dreading it, preparing for it. There they stood, all three of them. My mother, looking older and grayer than I remembered, my father, hunched and defeated, and Rachel, holding the hand of a small girl with dark curls and familiar green eyes. They'd brought the child. Of course they had. It was emotional manipulation at its finest, and exactly the kind of tactic I should have expected. I stood behind my door, frozen with indecision. I could pretend I wasn't home. I could call building security. I could wait them out. But the little girl, Sophia, chose that moment to speak. "Mommy, is Aunt Emma home? I want to meet her." Aunt Emma. They'd told her about me. After 8 years of silence, they'd told this innocent child she had an aunt behind this door. The cruelty of it, the manipulation of it, made my decision for me. I opened the door but kept the chain on. "You need to leave." "Emma!" My mother's face lit up with hope. "Please, just let us in. Let us talk." "No. What you're doing right now, bringing a child into this, is exactly why I want nothing to do with you. You're still the same people who raised me, still manipulating, still using whatever tactics you think will work. That little girl doesn't deserve to be a pawn in your games." Rachel stepped forward, Sophia clinging to her leg. "She's not a pawn. She's your niece. Don't you want to meet her?" I looked down at Sophia, who was gazing up at me with curious eyes. She looked so much like Rachel at that age, but there was something else there, too. An uncertainty, a wariness that seemed too old for such a young face. I recognized it. It was the look of a child who'd learned early that adults were unpredictable. "I'm sorry," I said, speaking directly to the little girl. "But your mommy and I can't be friends right now. It's not your fault, sweetheart. None of this is your fault." "Emma, please." My father spoke for the first time. "We drove 3 hours to get here. Just give us 5 minutes." "You drove 3 hours without calling to see if I'd be willing to see you. You showed up at my home uninvited, ambushing me with a child to manipulate my emotions. This is exactly the kind of boundary-crossing behavior that made me leave in the first place." "We're desperate," Rachel burst out. "Do you understand that? We're about to be homeless. Sophia and I have been sleeping in Mom and Dad's living room for 6 months. I work 2 minimum wage jobs and it's not enough. You're sitting here in your fancy apartment with your successful business, and you can't even help your own family?" There it was. The entitlement. The assumption that my success somehow belonged to them, too. That the years of work, struggle, and growth I'd gone through alone somehow made me obligated to save them from their own choices. "My family," I said slowly, "consists of people who love and support me. People who see me as a whole person, not just a resource to exploit when times get tough. You stopped being my family the night you told me I ruined your lives." "That was 8 years ago," my mother wailed. How long are you going to punish us for one night?" "I'm not punishing you," I said, and I realized it was true. "I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. I'm not responsible for the consequences of your choices. I'm not obligated to fix problems I didn't create. And I'm definitely not required to open my life to people who've shown me repeatedly that they only value me when they need something." "So you're just going to let us be homeless?" Rachel's voice was rising, causing Sophia to press closer to her leg. "You're going to let your 3-year-old niece live on the street?" "I'm not letting anything happen. You're adults who made choices. If you're about to be homeless, there are resources available. Shelters, social services, job placement programs. What there isn't is a magic solution in the form of me bankrolling your lives because you've decided I owe you something." "We're family!" It was my mother again, playing the only card she seemed to have. "No," I said firmly. "We're relatives. Family is different. Family shows up for birthdays and graduations. Family calls to check in when you're sick. Family celebrates your successes instead of resenting them. Family doesn't wait 8 years to make contact and then only does so when they need money." "Fine," Rachel spat. "Be selfish. Live in your fancy apartment and forget where you came from. But when Sophia grows up, I'll make sure she knows her Aunt Emma had the chance to help and chose not to." I looked at Rachel, really looked at her. The golden child who'd never been told no, who'd never faced consequences, who'd been taught from birth that the world owed her everything. She was 31 years old with a child of her own, and she still hadn't learned accountability. "You do that," I said quietly. "Tell her whatever story makes you feel better. Or maybe, just maybe, use this as an opportunity to teach her something different. Teach her that she's responsible for her own choices, that she can't blame others for her failures, that she needs to work for what she wants instead of expecting others to provide it. Teach her to be better than we were taught to be." I started to close the door, but my father's hand shot out to stop it. For a moment, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Regret. Real, deep regret. "Emma," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. I should have been a better father. You deserved better than what we gave you." It was the first genuine apology I'd received, and it hit harder than I expected. But it was also too late. Some wounds cut too deep to heal with words. "Thank you for saying that," I managed. "But sorry doesn't change anything. I hope you figure things out, I really do. But it can't be with my help. Please don't come here again." This time when I closed the door, they didn't stop me. I heard them arguing in the hallway, my mother's shrill voice blaming my father, Rachel blaming both of them, Sophia starting to cry. The sounds faded as they made their way to the elevator, and then there was silence. I slid down the door and sat on my floor, emotionally drained. I'd dreamed of this moment in various forms over the years. Sometimes I imagined grand revenge, sometimes tearful reconciliation, but the reality was neither. It was just sad. Sad and final and necessary. The next few weeks were a blur of blocked numbers and returned letters. They tried everything: guilt, anger, pleading, even having other relatives I barely remembered reach out on their behalf. Each attempt only reinforced that I'd made the right decision. These weren't people who'd grown or changed. They were just desperate. I threw myself into work, launching a new course on resilience and overcoming adversity. It was my most successful launch to date. I donated a portion of the proceeds to a local shelter for homeless families, thinking of Sophia. It wasn't her fault she'd been born into dysfunction, but it wasn't my responsibility to perpetuate it either. Months passed. The attempts at contact gradually tapered off, then stopped entirely. I heard through the grapevine of social media, distant relatives who didn't know I'd cut contact, that they'd moved to a smaller town where the cost of living was lower. Rachel had apparently enrolled in community college. My parents had found work. They were surviving. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, not anger, just a blessed nothing where they used to live in my head. I continued to build my life. I started dating a wonderful man named Marcus, who understood boundaries and respected mine. I made friends with other entrepreneurs who became my chosen family. I traveled to places I'd only dreamed of as a child. I lived. 2 years after they'd shown up at my door, I received one final email. This time it was from my father's email address, but the writing style was clearly Sophia's with adult help. Dear Aunt Emma, my name is Sophia and I am 5 years old. Mommy said, you are very smart and good at business. I am learning to read and write. Grandpa is teaching me. We live in a new house now. It is small but nice. Mommy goes to school. She says she wants to be like you. I hope someday I can meet you when everyone is not sad anymore. Love, Sophia. I read the email 3 times. Then I composed a reply. Dear Sophia, thank you for your email. I'm very proud of you for learning to read and write. That's wonderful. I'm glad you have a nice house and that your mommy is going to school. Learning is very important. Keep being awesome, and remember that you can be anything you want to be if you work hard and believe in yourself. Love, Aunt Emma. I sent it, and then created a new email filter. Any future emails from that address would go to a folder I'd check once a year, on my birthday. It was a boundary that allowed for the possibility of something different someday while protecting my peace in the present. Marcus found me in my office later, staring out the window at the mountains. You okay? He asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Yeah, I said, and meant it. I really am. The email? I'd told him about it, of course. We didn't have secrets. A 5-year-old shouldn't have to carry adult burdens, I said, but at least someone is teaching her to read and write? That's something. You did the right thing, he said, kissing the top of my head, both in responding and in maintaining your boundaries. I know, I said. It's just complicated? Yeah. Most important things are. We stood there together, watching the sun set over the mountains. In a few hours, I'd be giving a virtual presentation to 200 business leaders about overcoming adversity. Tomorrow, I had meetings with potential investors for a new educational platform I was developing. Next week, Marcus and I were flying to Hawaii for our first vacation together. My life was full, rich, meaningful, and it was mine. The girl who'd been told she ruined everything had built something beautiful from nothing. The invisible child had become a visible, valuable adult. The scapegoat had refused to carry sins that weren't hers to bear. Sometimes the greatest act of love, for yourself and even for those who've hurt you, is simply walking away. It forces everyone to face their own truth, to carry their own weight, to solve their own problems. It breaks cycles that have persisted for generations. I think about Sophia sometimes. Hope she's learning different lessons than her mother and I did. I hope she knows she's valuable for who she is, not what she can do for others. I hope she never has to choose between her family and her self-worth. But mostly, I think about the path I've walked and the person I've become. Every struggle, every lonely night, every small victory led me here. To this life, this love, this freedom to choose who gets access to my world. I used to think I was broken because I couldn't earn my family's love. Now I know the truth. Their love was broken, not me. Came with conditions and costs I could never meet. Real love, the kind I've found with Marcus, with my chosen family, with myself, doesn't require you to be smaller so others can feel bigger. It doesn't demand you light yourself on fire to keep others warm. Real love celebrates your growth instead of resenting it. Real love shows up in both good times and bad. Real love doesn't wait 8 years to check if you're still alive, and then only call when it needs something. So, to anyone out there who's been told they're not enough, who's been blamed for things beyond their control, who's considering whether staying in toxicity is better than facing the unknown, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me sooner. You are not responsible for other people's happiness at the expense of your own. You are not obligated to fix problems you didn't create. You are allowed to build boundaries that protect your peace. You are worthy of love that doesn't hurt. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for everyone involved is to simply walk away and build something better. My name is Emma. I'm 32 years old. I am successful, loved, and free. And none of it happened until I stopped trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I didn't belong. That cold November night when I walked out with nothing but $1,847 and a backpack wasn't the night my life ended. It was the night it finally began, and I wouldn't change a single thing.